want to welcome everyone to our judges training for this hour. And then the next hour will be Chief Judges training. So you can stay for that if you want more information about being a chief judge. Thank you for joining us this evening. You're going to learn a lot. And I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Kari Evans. I'm the Program Quality Director for this year, and I get to do fun things like help put on trainings for District 44, including judges training. Before I introduce our contest co-chairs, I wanted to take a moment to introduce our District Director, Madam District Director, Roxanne Rush is here.
Good evening, everybody.
And we have our past district governor and past region advisor, Perrin Shannon is here as well. So welcome, Perrin.
Good evening. Thank you.
Now I get to introduce the fabulous, fantastic District 44 contest co-chairs for this year. Our contest chair is Ebony Brown, if you want to wave and say hello to everyone.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for being here.
And Ebony just finished a term as area director in Division B. And she has been a division director before. So she has lots of experience with contests. And then our contest co-chair is Tanisha Bulla, and she is also the Division B director and finished a term as area director in Division B, and also has lots of experience with contests. And so I was excited to bring these two together, and I know that they are going to put on a fantastic training for you and give you all the information that you need so that you can have success as a judge and take part in successful contests this year. So I will welcome Tanisha, and she will begin the training.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kari, and good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to see all of your faces on camera and to get into our judges training for the night. So we do have a lot of information to cover in a short amount of time. So I will ask, as we go along through the presentation, if you have questions, please place them in the chat. We want to make sure that when a question comes to your mind, you don't forget it, it doesn't get lost. So we want to place them in the chat so that way when we get to Q&A, we'll have some questions lined up and make sure that you get the answers that you need throughout the training. So before we jump into the training itself, and before we know where we're going, we have to know where we've been and where we are. So my question to you all is, why do you think that speech contests are important? If you could just place your answer to that question in the chat. Why are speech contests important? Why do we do it in Toastmasters? So we could just have our regular meetings, fellowship there, and grow with our speaking skills and all of that good stuff. So why speech contests? I like that, Damon. Keep Toastmasters fun. Yes, it gives that element of surprise. Encourage members. We got a second from Carrie on the fun. I love that. To see ourselves compared to others, absolutely. Help skill building and skills growth to a new level. I love that. We got a third on have fun. I know a lot of people enjoy speech contests, competition to grow, feeling of accomplishment. So great. So you guys have some really great answers to that question. You are all right. So we do speech contests in order to help us grow as speakers. So we get to see more seasoned speakers as we go higher in the ranks from the club all the way up to the district level and beyond. So we get that aspect of learning from those before us. And then we get to practice what we've learned. We get to understand how far we've come from the beginning and do an evaluation of where we are at that moment when we participate in speech contests. Toastmasters International has guidelines for speech contests. I would strongly suggest, with a huge emphasis on strongly, that if you're going to put together a contest, that you actually read the contest rulebook. It has so many great information inside of it, and it has a lot of the information that you'll probably be looking for as you begin to prepare for your contest. So not only does it have the contest rules, it also has some nice checklists. So it lets the contest chair and the chief judge know what they should be doing and gives an order to those items. And then it also gives you other materials and additional resources. So other places that you can go to get more information on how to put your speech contest together. You're also going to see any changes that have taken place from the previous year to this year. Those are going to be denoted and specially marked inside of the speech contest rulebook. So it's really important that you have the current year's rulebook so that you can be aware of any changes that have taken place since the last year. So we are in the throes of contest season already. As you can see, from July 1st to August 31st, we're looking at clubs to have their humorous and evaluation contests. So you all, if you have not started talking about that in your clubs, now is an absolute great time to start that discussion because clubs have until August 31st in order to get those club contests completed. You'll see the other timelines for the area and division levels, and at the bottom there in blue, you'll also see our timeline for the international contest that starts at the beginning of next year. So we're going to take a look at some of the contestant rules that are involved in speech contests. One, in order for you to be eligible to compete in a speech contest, you must be a paid member. So there's no way around not being paid. You must have paid your membership dues in order for you to compete in a speech contest. Your club also must be in good standing. So it is not one or the other. Both of those things work together when it comes to speech contests. So if you have paid your dues, but there are only 4 members in your club that have paid their dues and your club is no longer active, you are then ineligible to compete in the speech contest. So I really want to make sure I emphasize that your club also has to be in good standing. And then you must maintain that eligibility all the way through the contest that you compete in. So if you're eligible at the club level, but then you hit the area and then your club is no longer in good standing, you are now ineligible and you cannot move forward in the contest because at that point in time, you're no longer eligible. There are also some rules pertaining to originality. So contestants must make sure that 25% or less of their speech is devoted to paraphrasing, quoting, or referencing another person's content. And you also must make sure that you label that person's content within your speech. So you have to identify that the things that you're saying, whether it be paraphrasing or a direct quote, has come from another source. You must also not reference any other contestant's speech or a contestant in your speech. So that means if Kari went before me, I can't say, like Kari said in her speech talking about butterflies, because now I'm referencing another contestant as well as her speech. You must have completed at least 6 speeches within the Competent Communicator Manual. And again, that only qualifies if you were in Toastmasters before Pathways started. That means you can't pick up a Competent Communicator Manual now and then complete 6 speeches in order to be eligible to compete in the contest. You must have already been a Toastmaster prior to Pathways being implemented. If you came in when Pathways was implemented, then you need to have completed levels 1 and 2 of a path in order to be eligible to compete in a speech contest. The only caveat to that is charter members. If you're a part of a club that recently chartered and it's less than 1 year before the club contest, you are permitted to participate in a speech contest. So we've gotten a lot of questions about people that are in more than one club. That's a lot of us. I'm in that same boat as well. I love Toastmasters and I'm a part of a couple of different clubs. So you are able to compete in multiple club contests when you are in multiple clubs. The caveat here is that you cannot compete in multiple area, division, or district contests in multiple districts or divisions. So that means that you can't be a contestant in the humorous speech contest at the area level in District 14 and then go to District 44 and also compete in the area contest for that same contest. So I wanted to make sure that we clarified that because I know that's been a question in the past and that some people have asked recently. So just a little tidbit of information about the multiple club membership. There are also other stipulations that come with the international speech contest. So we have all of the other rules that I've talked about thus far for contestants, but when it comes to the international speech contest, we're going to add in the fact that you have had to have completed levels 1 and 2 of any path, as well as 6 of those speeches from the Competent Communicator Manual.
And Jerome had a good question, Tanisha. He asked, does the CC or Pathways Level 1 and 2 requirement apply to all contests or only international?
Great question, Jerome. So that actually applies to all contests. So levels 1 and 2 have to be. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kari.
It's for international, for humorous and evaluation. It's just being a paid member.
Well, okay, so I stand corrected then. So just for the international speech contest, it's levels 1 and 2 have to be completed. Thank you for that, Kari.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Jerome, for that question. So moving on to some of the contest rules. So contests must originate at the club level. So that means that you don't necessarily have to have a contest at the club level. You can nominate or volunteer someone for the club to move forward, but that person needs to originate from the club before they can go to the area level. At the area level, you do have to have a contest. So if there are any area directors on the line, you do need to begin preparing for an area contest because you need to have an area contest. From the area, it moves up to the division as well as to the district. So the sequence of events for a person that's in a speech contest is the club, then moving up to the area, the division, and then to the district, and hopefully beyond. Districts also must conduct the international speech contest. They have the option to conduct up to 3 additional speech contests if they choose, and then they have another option to do up to 4 contests of non-English contests. When it comes to speech contests, there's also a 1 minute of silence that's given to individuals after the contestants have completed their speech. So that means the judges are enabled to have 1 minute of silence where they can go forward and complete their ballots. After the last contestant has gone, then the contest chair or the contest master will ask that there be complete silence until the judges have completed their ballots and they have been turned into the chief judge. All voting judges and the tiebreaking judge must judge all contestants. So that means even if a contestant doesn't finish their speech, the judges are required to judge that particular contestant. And in order for a ballot to be valid, you have to enter your first, second, and third place choices, as well as sign and print your name on the ballot. So that's an important note for all judges. So again, that first, second, and third place only is a stipulation if there are at least 3 contestants. If you have a contest and there are only 2 contestants, then your ballot would be valid by having the first and second place listed on your ballot. So we're going to go through the different rules for the separate contests. So we will be doing 3 different contests throughout this Toastmasters year. We'll be doing the humorous speech contest, the evaluation contest, as well as the international speech contest. So as I mentioned earlier, contestants must be a paid member and have either won at the club, area, and or the division levels. The subject for a humorous speech contest is selected by the contestant, so they have the ability to choose their own subject for the speech. Contestants must create their own speeches and each must have a substantial amount of originality. So again, that goes back to only that 25% being able to be allotted to paraphrase or quoted material. And then particularly for the humorous speech contest, the speech must be thematic in nature. So that means that it has to have an opening, a body, and a conclusion. It cannot just be a string of one-liners for your speech. On the right-hand side, we have the criteria that the judges use in order to judge a contestant. So we won't go through all of those piece by piece. We'll talk about them a little bit more later, but I wanted to make sure that you all had it on the slides to review. Next, we'll take a look at the evaluation contest. You'll see that second column there changes quite a bit when we go from humorous speech contest to the evaluation contest. So a lot of the left-hand side is going to be the same. So again, contestants are paid members. As far as the speech topic, though, that changed for that second bullet point there. So each contestant must talk about the speech that they're evaluating. They can't just make up a speech about some other thing. Their speech has to revolve around the speech that they're evaluating. Contestants have 5 minutes to prepare their evaluation. So after the test speaker is finished giving their speech, the evaluation contestants will go to a breakout room and they will have 5 minutes to collect their thoughts about the evaluation. They will then be called one by one back into the main room for them to give their speeches. Again, on that right-hand side, we have all of the different criteria that are used to be evaluated for the evaluation contest by the judges. And the last contest that we will talk about is the international contest. So again, a lot of the same rules as we saw in the humorous contest. We have contestants must be paid members, the subject of the speech is selected by the contestant, and then that final bullet point says if only one contestant, they only need to qualify for time. I will say that they also need to make sure that they qualify for originality as well. So someone cannot bring a book and read for 5 minutes straight from the book. They still have to have an original speech, but we're looking to make sure that they qualify for time. And then on that right-hand column, we have all of the different criteria that the judges will use to judge for the international contest. Now, really digging into talking about judging, we're going to look into first the eligibility of judges. So that first line has for all contestants, they must absolutely complete the judge's certification of eligibility and code of ethics. We're going to dig into that form a little bit later, but that is the requirement for the chief judge to have prior to the contest starting. So each and every judge must complete that. That is including the tie-breaking judge as well. And again, that must be in before the start of the contest. At the club level, judges only need to be paid members. That's the only criteria. As we move further up, looking at the area, division, and district, however, there are other stipulations that come into play. So they must have been a paid member for a minimum of 6 months. So there's a time frame that's placed on that paid membership. They must have completed 6 speeches in the competent communicator manual. Again, that goes back to what I discussed before, that this only applies to you if you were a Toastmaster before Pathways was originated. If not, then you have to look at the Pathways criteria, which is having completed levels 1 and 2 of any path in Pathways. They must also not be a member of any club which a contestant is a member. So that's where it becomes really important for the chief judge to share who the contestants are so the judges know if they're able to be judges as well. And then we have the criteria for above and beyond the district. So again, we have that paid membership for over 6 months, and they must at least be an advanced Toastmaster bronze or advanced communicator bronze, or have completed 1 path in Pathways. Now we're going to take a look just at the number of judges that are required per each contest. So you'll see kind of the sequence as we go up into the different contest types. So at the club level, 5 voting judges is recommended, as well as a tie-breaking judge, 2 ballot counters, and 2 timers if possible. So that if possible is for all of the clubs that may not have a large membership base. We all know that Toastmasters recommends that we have 20 members, but some clubs may not have that. In order to be an active club, you only need 8 members. So a club with 8 members may struggle to try and find all of these different facilitating roles. So that number is a little less than it is as we get higher in the rankings. When we go up to area, you'll see that the amount of judges needs to be equal to the number of of clubs in the area, or a minimum of 5 voting judges. So again, I want to emphasize that word minimum because there's no maximum listed there. I would strongly encourage anyone that's planning a contest to try and get more judges than the minimum, just because we all know that life happens. So if there's one judge that falls off, you don't want to have your contest at risk because you only got the minimum judges. So I would definitely encourage you all to try and get more than the minimum. That way you have backups if you need them. For the area contest, you also have a contest chair, a chief judge, a tie-breaking judge, 2 ballot counters, and 2 timers. Then moving up to the division, we go up in that number of minimum of judges. So we go from 5 at the area and we jump up to 7. So now you must have a minimum of 7 judges at your division contest. Again, recommended that you have more than that 7 in case something happens. You have a contest chair, a chief judge, 2 ballot counters, and 2 timers. Then we also have that stipulation, if you look at the division line that says the chief judge, voting judges, and the tie-breaking judge must not be a member of any club in which the contestant is a member. So again, that goes back to making sure that the judges are aware of who the contestants are in the contest in advance, so they know if they're members of that club or not. And then we go up to the district. So again, there's a minimum of 7, but there must be a voting judge for each division. So if there's more than 7 divisions, then you need more than 7 judges. Just want to be clear that that's based on the number of divisions in the district. Looking at the facilitating roles. So again, you have a contest chair, you have a chief judge, you have 3 ballot counters. So that number goes up for the district level. And then you have 2 timers that are appointed. And then we still have that stipulation that the chief judge, the voting judges, and the tie-breaking judge must not be a member of the same club as one of the contestants. So moving on from there, we're going to talk a little bit about ethics. So I've placed a couple of examples of some biases that people may have when it comes to judging contestants. There's a success bias. So you may know a contestant and you know they've been great before and they've won other contests that you have watched. So you score them a little higher than you do the others because you know that they are really good at what they do. There's a position bias as well. So you're judging the earlier contestants a little bit harsher than you're judging the contestants that come a little later in the contest. And last but not least is the cultural bias. So sometimes we have an unconscious bias for contestants that look like us. So we want to see those contestants do well. So we tend to judge them a little more easily than we do the other contestants. Some other things that you want to consider is, one, you're not to think about the contestants' club, their area, division, or district. So if you dislike Division B, you don't want to judge a contest or a contestant that's come from that division just because you don't care for that division. You also are not to consider a contestant's age, sex, creed, national origin, profession, or political beliefs when you're judging the contest. And last but not least, you should only be judging your contest on the criteria that's in front of you on your ballot sheet. So if there's a criteria that's not listed there, you are not to be judging on that particular criteria during the contest. And last but not least, we want to talk about judging virtually because that's a little different than what we're used to from judging in person. So looking at the camera is considered eye contact. So there are some contests that ask you to think about eye contact. So that's something to keep in mind. You are not to take into account a contestant's audio or video quality as well. So those should not be taken into consideration. Contestants do not have to stand up. It is their choice whether they want to stand up or not. So you cannot judge someone that stands up differently than you judge someone that's sitting down, and they do not have to show their entire body. So again, if I just wanted to show what you all can see on the screen now, that is perfectly fine, and I should not be judged any differently than the other contestants, as well as there is no dress code. Now, I mentioned earlier the certification of eligibility and code of ethics form. So we're just going to take a peek at the different sections that are in there. So at the top of the form, it's going to ask you to complete the name of the contest and the level at which you're judging. It's also going to ask for you to input the date. So you want to make sure that all of those areas are checked off and marked off on your form. It is also going to go into all of the different items that I talked about from an eligibility perspective. Now, I know we have a lot of people that may have judged contests before, and you may have just signed your name on the dotted line and not really taken time to look at the different sections. I just encourage everybody to really take a look at what you're signing. So again, it's going to make sure that you are eligible to be a judge. So if you have any questions about if you're able to judge a contest, this form is a great place to look because it tells you all of the different items that you need to have checked off in order to be a judge. It also talks about the code of ethics. So that goes into some of those biases that I was talking about a couple screens ago. So it tells you about how you should be judging when you're in that position as well. So again, when you have a moment, I really encourage everyone to take a look at this form and really read it before you sign it to make sure that you are eligible, one, to be a judge and that you understand the task at hand. So we're really quickly going to go through some of the judging criteria for the different contests. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these because there's a lot of information on the screen, but we'll talk about each of the criteria individually quickly. So there's one criteria is speech development. So that's really how is the speaker putting their ideas together? Is it flowing in a way that makes sense to the judge? So speech development is a part of the international and the humorous speech contest. There's also effectiveness. So that is essentially looking at the audience's reception of the speech, or how the judge believes that the audience is taking in the contestant's speech. That's also a part of the international and humorous speech contest. There's speech value. Again, this justifies the kind of the act of speaking. So you're really looking at, is this person saying something meaningful? Was there a message that came out of the speech? Physical is one of them, somewhat more self-explanatory than some of the others. So that's how the speech has been presented. How is the speaker carrying him or herself and their responsibility for the speech at hand? And lastly on this page is voice. So that is the sound of the message that's being carried from the speech. And the judges are really taking a look at that and how they believe that it's come across to the audience. We also have manner, that's a part of the international and humorous speech contest. So that's the indirect relation of the speaker's real self as the speech is delivered. So does it sound believable? Would be a great way to look at that. Do I really believe that this person would be saying what they're saying if I met them at another place? Appropriateness is another criteria that's in the international and humorous speech contest. So that's just thinking about the language. Did the speaker use language that was appropriate for their speech? Correctness is the next criteria that we'll discuss. So that's just making sure that that language is correct. So whatever they use, did those things go together well and marry together well? Did the audience feel like the speaker was speaking to them? And then for the humorous speech contest, we also have audience response. So as the speaker is speaking, how is the audience responding to the information that's being presented to them? Now, the evaluation speech contest has different criteria than all of the other contests. So for evaluation, that is the person that's listening to a test speaker and they're giving the evaluation and feedback to that test speaker. So the criteria for an evaluation contest is the analytical quality. So how effective was the evaluation? Could the speaker pick up and take the recommendations and make a decision to move forward and become a better speaker? Second one, did they give recommendations? So were there ideas that the speaker gave to the test speaker that could help make their speech better? The third one is the technique. So how did the speaker give the recommendation and make the speech analytical? And then how did they wrap it up? That summation. So how did they bring their speech to a close? Protests and disqualifications are always a fun topic to discuss whenever we have a judges training. So contestants can be disqualified for time. So essentially that is going beyond the allotted time that they were given for the speech. There's typically a 30-second buffer on both sides for the speech contest. So if they go outside of those timeframes, then the speaker is able to be disqualified from the speech. Now that we're in this virtual environment, I know there have also been a lot of questions about what happens if the speaker's technology goes out. So the district has given speakers 5 minutes to get back onto the Zoom call in order to still be in the contest. So that's a really important piece for all of us that are going to be doing these virtual contests. Some of the other options for protest are eligibility, originality, and then reference to another contestant's speech. So when we think about protests, we want to know, one, who's able to lodge those protests, and then what's the procedure after the protest has been lodged. So that's what those last 2 bullet points go over on the screen in front of you. So protests can only be lodged by voting judges and/or contestants. So that means not audience members, not the chief judge, not the contest master, voting judges and/or contestants. Now they lodge those protests with the chief judge and/or the contest chair. So I know there's sometimes some confusion there. So we go back, voting judges and contestants can lodge the protests, and they lodge those protests with the chief judge or the contest chair. And it has to be prior to the announcements of the winners. The contest chair also has the ability to disqualify a contestant based on eligibility. So if the contest chair finds out that at some point in time that contestant was not a paid member or their club was not an active club, they're able to disqualify a contestant for those reasons. Originality or referencing another contestant's speech must allow the contestant the opportunity to explain themselves, essentially. I'll say it that way. So if there is a protest about originality or referencing another contestant's speech, all of the voting judges will confer in a breakout room. The contestant will be brought in to explain why they believe that their speech was original. From that point, the contestant will leave. The voting judges will vote on if they feel like the contestant should be disqualified or not, and majority vote rules. It's important to realize once that decision is made, that decision is also final. So whether they decide to disqualify or not, that decision is final for the contest. So I see a question in the chat. How will a judge know if a participant is eligible? So the contest chair will be the person looking at eligibility for the contestants. So the contest chair is the person that's able to disqualify for eligibility. So I hope that answers your question, Geraldine. The last thing that I want to note in reference to protests and disqualifications is we do not want to discuss house business in front of the crowd. What that means is you do not want to unmute yourself in the middle of the contest and say, hey, I watched this movie last night and I know that contestant 3 did not have an original speech. You want to get in contact with your chief judge or your contest chair, whether that be by phone. So again, it's a good technique to make sure that you have the chief judge's phone number as well as the contest chair's phone number, but you have to find another method to get in contact with the contest chair or the chief judge. And again, as I mentioned, you will leave the contest room, the voting judges will go and we will defer in another breakout room, so that's not done in front of the audience. So I'm going to quickly go through the next couple of slides because I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A before we get to taking the assessment. So just thinking about the forms, so we must use the official ballot form. So for all the contests that we have throughout the year, you're going to use the official form. You must break your own ties as a judge. So you can't have more than one person's name on any line. You must include your first, second, and third place. Again, if there's only 2 contestants, your ballot is still valid if you just list those 2. And then tie-breaking judges must rank all of the contestants. So we'll see in a second the difference between a voting judge's ballot and the tie-breaking judge's ballot. Then we want to make sure that we destroy that ballot at the end of the contest. We want to keep everything confidential, so you want to make sure you do away with your ballot after it's been completed. So here's a look at the difference between the 2 different ballot forms. So on the left-hand side, we have just a regular voting judge's ballot. On the right-hand side, we have the tie-breaking judge's ballot. So you can see the bottom portion that is turned into the chief judge is a little bit different. So the bottom of the voting judge's ballot just has that first, second, and third place, and a place for signature and printing of the name. The tie-breaking judge must rank all of the contestants. So you're going to see 1 through 10 on the tie-breaking judge's ballot, along with their signature and printed name. Taking a peek at the ballot, so I have an example of a completed ballot in front of you. So you'll see that there is the first, second, and third place that's listed. It's signed and as well as printed. So this is a valid ballot because it's been signed, the judge's name is printed, and we have a first, second, and third place. So there are a couple of different ways that you can submit your ballot to your chief judge. So you can take a screenshot like I have of the bottom portion as well as send it over via email, or you can screenshot it and send it via a text message as well to your chief judge, or you can get a completely blank full page, only completing the bottom portion, and then send that via email or text message to your chief judge. All right. So I know that was a whole lot of information, but we are going to open it up for Q&A.
So Tanisha, there were some questions that we missed earlier. May ask if it's obvious that the contestant is reading their speech off their computer screen, should the judges consider that in their judging?
If that is a criteria that's on the judge's ballot, then they can consider it. But again, it's not necessarily anything that's going against originality or anything of that nature. So they have to look at the ballot that they have in front of them, what the criteria are, and judge based on the criteria that's on the form.
Thank you. And Teresa asked if you would be reviewing how the tiebreaker ballot is used.
So I can absolutely discuss that a little bit. So the tiebreaker ballot is only used if there is a tie amongst the ballot counters and the chief judge when they go to defer. So after all of the voting judges have submitted their ballots, the chief judge and the ballot counters will go into a breakout room to count the ballots. If there is a tie based on their count, then the chief judge will defer to the tie-breaking judge in order to break that tie.
That was it from the chat.
Okay. Any other
Miss
questions?
Ebony, I'm sorry, Miss Tanisha, this is Teresa again. Can I get just a tad bit of clarity on how that tiebreaker ballot is used? When the tiebreaker ballot is open, are the winners selected based on what the tie-breaking ballot says, or are those figures added to the total tallies? I've been in contests where both have happened. It's somewhat confusing, so I wondered if there was a solid stipulation on how to use that tiebreaker ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. So they should not be adding any other points from the tiebreaker's ballot because you already have a sort of sequential order. There's just a tie that you need to break. So you need to use the tiebreaker's judge to break that tie, and then that person that was tied will be in the next place after the person that won the tie break, if that makes sense. So if we go back, let's see if we can do it with a real live example. Oh, there we go. So if we look at the ballot that's on the left-hand side at the bottom, if, for example, Black Panther and Superman were tied for first, we would consult the tie-breaking judge's ballot. So let's say that the tie-breaking judge had Black Panther first. So that means Black Panther would be in first place. Superman would automatically be in second because he had the next highest score. So we wouldn't move Batman up. Batman would stay where he is. We would just move Superman into the next rank because Black Panther beat out Superman. But we wouldn't add any additional points because that could change the complete outcome that you have that you send over to the contest chair. Did that clarify, Teresa?
Perfect. That's what I needed.
Awesome.
And we've got some more questions in the chat.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, Carrie wants to know, how do we get assigned to a contest?
Great question. So you can get assigned to a contest many different ways. Typically, if you are on the trained judges list, you will get a lot of emails from people that are looking to add you as a judge. So that's what we're going to be doing this evening. There will be an assessment after a Q&A if you would like to be on the trained judges list. So that's essentially how you get assigned. You have a contest chair that reaches out to you to be a judge or take on any other facilitating role.
Okay, another question. Let's see, if a contestant's video got cut off and they didn't finish their speech and the 5 minutes waiting time is up, do their names get dropped from the ballots?
So sorry, I'm reading it as well just to make sure I understand the question. So if the video got cut off and they didn't finish their speech and the 5 minutes waiting time is up, do their names get dropped from the ballot? So technically, going off of the rule book, we still have to judge that contestant even though they did not finish their speech. So yes would be my answer to that question. Or no, I should say, I'm sorry, their names don't get dropped from the ballot. You still have to judge them.
Okay, and another question, with a disconnection, how must a contestant continue once he or she has regained connection?
That's a great question, Perrin. I believe that we just start them from the beginning. That's what we've done in other contests. But Kari, I don't know if you have any insight into, because I don't believe we would start them at where they left off at. I thought they would start from the beginning, but let me know if called by the powers that be.
Yes, and I have seen it different ways as well. depending on the contest last year. Some have started from the beginning if it happened towards the beginning. Sometimes if they're way into their speech, they have just picked up where they've left off. And so I think it seems like we have been flexible depending on where that contestant is in their speech.
Okay.
Kari, this is Karen.
Mhm.
I know I'm going to ask that question. I think last year what happened is the district created a problem for the contestant, thus allowing the contestant to recontinue, if I can recall. And I think you're correct. If a contestant is competing and loses connection within that 5 minutes, when they come back, they must continue where they are.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you for that, Karen.
All right. And then there's another question, or asking for a repeat. You made a statement about the number of contests held and up to 4 international contests. Could you repeat that statement?
So there weren't up to 4 international contests. So I think you're speaking of, Amy, when I talked about the number of contests that a district could have. So a district is able to have up to 3 contests outside of the international speech contest. So international speech contest is required, then the district can decide to have up to 3 additional contests. It also says in the rule book that districts can have up to 4 non-English contests if they choose. So that may be what you mean, heard from the 4. But again, you have to remember with speech contests, especially at the district level, they all have to be done at the conference. So if we had 12 contests throughout the year, they will all have to be done in that one time frame. So that's why the district typically limits the number of contests and doesn't have as many as we could potentially have, because all the district contests have to take place during that conference.
And then Ebony, thank you for answering the question about, do we tell them they must pick up from disconnect point before we start the contest? And Ebony responded, the contest master will relay this information during the debrief.
Yes, that's an important note, that the contest master relay any information about disqualifications, process, anything of that nature to the contestants during the briefing. So timing, all of that good stuff should be discussed during the briefing so that they're aware prior to the day of the contest.
Yes, and contest master chair and functionaries training is tomorrow.
All right, so we're almost at 7:15. So at 7:15, we're going to place the link to the assessment inside of the chat, and you will have 15 minutes to complete the assessment if you would like to be a part of the trained judges list. So any other questions? I think we may have time for one more.
There's one more in the chat, Tanisha. Can club contests have as few as 3 judges and a tiebreaker at the club level?
Yes, you can. As mentioned, for the club level, we understand that some clubs may not have a whole lot of members. So that's why we have that sort of, if possible, on the end of all of the recommendations for the club level for that fact and reason.
And I'll say this before we transition to the assessment. We are being contest season for a while. So once you become certified and you get on that list and people email you, as much as you can, try to be a judge for those contests, because you never know when you're going to need a judge. So it's really you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I just know when contest season start, I'm going to be pulled 6,000 different ways. And so one big Toastmaster family, help out whoever you can help out, understanding that they can't reach out to their peers because they may be in their area or their division. So they're reaching out to you. You may not know this person, get to know this person. So just try to help as much as you can. And trust that Tanisha and I will be calling you once we get to the district level. Thank you.
I'm glad you gave that plug, Ebony. Thank you for that. But you also learn so much by being a judge, especially just being in contests and seeing how things flow. So if you were looking for a better understanding, there's no better teacher than actually doing. Okay, we are at 7:15, so I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat for the assessment. Those of you that would like to be trained judges, please go ahead and click on that link and fill out the assessment. I will note after this, we're going to be doing chief judge training. So if you want to hang around and learn about the chief judge role, we'll be doing that right after, starting at 7:30.
Tanisha,
Yes, Jerome?
just a really simple question, almost dumb a little. The form that you just put in the chat is the assessment for judges training, not for chief judges training, correct?
Correct. So it's for judges training.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you are staying for the chief judges training, or if you have just joined, I think at least one, maybe one or two new people have joined. And so we will start again with moving forward. I'm Kari Evans, a program quality director, and I have with me the awesome, fabulous contest co-chairs, district contest co-chairs, and we will go over chief judge training. And this was a little different, and we separated it this time because we wanted to talk a little more about how to organize your chief judge's briefing, how to work with the judges, and things of that nature. And so I will turn it over to Tanisha to start talking about chief judge training.
Awesome. Thank you again, Kari. And long time no see, everyone. It's been so long since I talked to you. So just like we started the other segment, if you were here for the judges training, I'm going to start this session as well with a question. So why is the chief judge role important to a contest? Why do we need that role? Couldn't the contest chair just do it all? We're Toastmasters, right? So why is that role important? So please place your answers in the chat. The contest master has enough to do already. Yes, that is a very good answer, Jerome. Touche. Yep, so Cheryl has to gather the judges team, right? So we have a separate person gathering the judges team. There are a lot of moving parts in having a chief judge to manage those. I'm sorry, your answer is moving up as people are putting stuff in the chat. But having a chief judge to manage the judges makes sense, absolutely. So we're delegating some of that responsibility and leveraging another role. You need someone to make sure rules are followed and assist with any issues. So yes, another helping hand in order to help with those issues. So great answers, everybody. So as we talked about, if you were here again for the judges training, the speech contest rulebook is great for chief judges as well. There's a contest checklist that's in there that's really useful for the chief judge. And it also gives eligibility and all of those fun stuff for the judges that the chief judge is going to want to know. So again, I highly recommend actually reading the rule book, especially if you're going to be a chief judge, just because you need to really truly understand that role in order to deliver information to the judges, the ballot counters, as well as the timers when you do your briefing. So there are a couple of functionaries that come into play when it comes to the chief judge. So the chief judge is responsible for briefing the ballot counters as well as the timers. So there's just a brief description of those two roles. So the ballot counter is going to go into the breakout room with the chief judge in order to help count the ballots from the judges. And then the timer, of course, is really crucial to any contest because they're making sure all of the speakers are speaking within the given time frame. And those timers are going to then give their timing sheet over to the chief judge as he or she is deliberating with the ballot counters inside of their breakout room. So there are a couple of different responsibilities that the chief judge has. So when we think about a checklist, we can look at it from the standpoint of what the chief judge does before the contest, what happens during the contest, and then what the chief does after the contest has completed. So when we look at before the contest, one, he wants to appoint and counsel the voting judges. So you want to make sure that you have the listing of who the judges are and that you have their contact information because you're going to want to be able to get in contact with them before and during the contest. You're going to want to make sure to provide them all the documentation that they need. So the ballots that you're going to give to the judges, you're going to make sure you have their contact information, disseminate that information. You want to encourage us, as I've been encouraging you all throughout these past 2 trainings, for them to actually read the rule book. I actually have one printed out next to me, so that way I have all the rules at hand, but it's really such a helpful tool. As you see, Ebony is the one that prompted me to do that, so she just held hers up to the camera as well. But it comes in really handy when you have those quick questions about, can I do this, or should I do this, or whose responsibility is it to do what, and it really helps you cut through those uncertainties. They're going to want to make sure that they confirm the speaking order with the contest chair so they know what order that the contestants are going to be in and have a listing of the contestants. Because again, in some speech contests, people cannot judge if there's a contestant that's in their club. So we want to make sure we know who the contestants are so we can relay that information to the judges and keep that in mind when we're choosing judges as well. And then the chief judge is going to conduct the briefing for those voting judges as well as the ballot counters and the timers. So when we think about the briefing for the timers, you're going to make sure that you review the timesheet with them. So you want to make sure they know how to complete the timesheet. You're going to discuss what they're going to use as their timing device. So again, we'll all be doing contests virtually. So you want to make sure that they have the virtual background so they're able to flip between the green, the yellow, and the red seamlessly. You're also going to confirm with them when they should start timing. So they need to know that it's any nonverbal or verbal cue that comes from the speaker is when they need to start their timing. So if I start coming up and waving my hands in the air, because that's a part of my speech, the timer should begin timing from that moment, even though I didn't say anything per se. So it's really important for them to understand it's verbal or nonverbal cue because that person's speech has started. They also need to know that they can only display one color at a time. So we don't want to confuse the speaker while they're speaking. So it should be one color that's shown at a time, and that color does not change until it's time to change to the other color. That's really important because if a speaker is speaking and you just sort of do a glimpse of the green and turn it off, that speaker may have missed that cue. We want to make sure that the speaker gets every single cue that we have to offer. So you want to keep that green up until it's time to turn to yellow, keep that yellow up until it's time to turn to red, and then the speaker doesn't get any other clues or signals that they're past time after you have that red up. So there's no, I know sometimes in club contests, some people will do the rainbow, so they'll go back from green to yellow to red, green to yellow to red, just to make it clear that that person is approaching their time. That is not done in contest. It stays red until that speaker is done speaking. You also want to make sure that you talk about if something were to occur where the winner was announced incorrectly. So let's say, for example, there was a time disqualification that was talked about by the chief judge, but the contest master or contest chair announces that person won first place. You as a timer have the ability to ask the contest master or contest chair to confer because at that point, the winner was announced incorrectly. So timers do have that capability. So you want to make sure that they're aware of that and to remind them that they already use discretion and confidentiality. So that means they shouldn't go on social media talking about the contest and how they were a timer and this person got disqualified and all that information stays in-house. The chief judge also will brief the ballot counters. So again, they need their tally sheet just like the timers needed their time sheet. You also want to discuss how the ballots are going to be received. That's really, really important for contests. So they need to understand how they're going to receive the ballots and how they're going to be reviewed. You're going to talk about what's going to happen if somebody is disqualified for time. So again, after the ballots have been counted, the chief judge will consult the timesheet and will let them know if there was a disqualification for time. Okay. You're going to let them know the steps in the event that there's a tie. So what happens if they're counting the ballots and there's a tie? So you need to make them understand that there's going to be a tie-breaking ballot that's going to be sent to you and only to you, that you all will confer if there happens to be a tie. They also need to be aware of the procedures if a winner is announced wrong. They have the same capability as the timers have, so you need to make them aware of that. And they also need to be discreet about the contest. So they can't go on social media again, claim it was super close, this person only won by 2 points. No, that information again stays within the contest. And then the chief judge is also responsible for briefing the judges. So the form that I reviewed during the judges training, the certification of eligibility, that form needs to be reviewed with your judges. So they need to understand what the code of ethics is and what they're agreeing to do as they're agreeing to be judges for the contest. If you were in an in-person contest, the second bullet point really goes more towards that. So the designated speaking area. With us being virtual, there's been a lot of flexibility that has come with the speaking area because you're not in a confined space, but you definitely want to discuss that with your judges. You want to review that there's no contestant dress code. So there's no particular way that the contestant is supposed to be dressed for the contest. So that's not something that they should be judging on. You'll let them know that they're going to be giving the opportunity to fill out their ballots by having moments of silence. So after each contestant speaks, there will be a 1 minute of silence. After all the contestants have gone, there will be an indefinite amount of silence until all the judges are done and completed their ballots. So that gives them time to think and really contemplate how they want to complete their ballots in those minutes of silence, as well as the silence at the end. You want to talk to them as well and let them know that they must break their own ties. They cannot send you a ballot form that has more than one person on one line. So each line should only have one contestant's name listed. And you also want to go over the components of a valid ballot. So they need to understand that the ballot needs to have first, second, and third place if applicable. Again, as we mentioned, if there's only 2 contestants, there will only be a first and second place. The ballot needs to be signed and your name needs to be printed on the ballot as well in order for it to be valid. You'll talk about protest and disqualification procedures with your judges. So they need to understand what's going to happen if they raise their hand for a protest. So for example, if they decide that they think that a contestant's speech is not original, they need to know that we're going to have to go to a breakout room. We're going to have to invite the contestant into that breakout room to give their sort of appeal, for lack of a better word. And then all of the judges will vote on whether that person will be disqualified or not. And then of course, the judges have to have discretion and confidentiality as well. So they can't discuss how they scored any of the contestants or give any feedback on the contest itself after it has ended. So now we're moving on to during the contest. So the chief judge is going to want to collect the time record. That's really, really important because that's going to come directly to the chief judge. You're going to want to make sure you collect the tie-breaking judge's ballot because again, that's another document that's just coming to the chief judge. And then you're going to want to make sure that you receive the voting judge's ballots. So again, it's going to be really important to go over with your judges how they're going to get their ballot to you so that you can make sure that you get all of those ballots timely. You're going to help with resolving any eligibility or originality protests that may arise. So if you have a judge coming to you saying that they have a protest for originality, you are the one that needs to be able to set up that breakout room and arrange everything so that you can have that debrief with the voting judges. You're going to oversee the ballot counting process. So again, after you have collected all the ballots, you're going to leave the main room, go to a separate breakout room with your ballot counters, and they're going to count the ballots. And then you all will make sure that all of the numbers that have come up on those ballot sheets are in agreement. Once you have done that, you're going to record those rankings in that notification of contest winners form so that you have the listing of the winners in order to share with your contest chair. You're going to complete a results form as well that has those same results on it. And then you're going to make sure, again, that you give that information over to your contest chair. Last but not least, you need to ensure that the winners are announced correctly. So for some reason, the contest chair pulls, I call it a Steve Harvey now because he introduced the wrong Miss America previously. But if you hear that the second place is being announced as the first place and you know that's incorrect, then you need to make that right by asking to confer with the contest chair or the contest master. Now, what do you do after the contest? First thing is first you destroy all ballots, all time records, any evidence essentially that you have regarding the contest needs to be destroyed. You want to make sure you submit the notification of winners form to the contest chair for the next contest because they're going to need that information as they're starting to plan their contest. You're going to encourage all your speech officials to review the rule book and contest resources as well, and then confirm the speaking order with the contest chair.
No, I just logged on, but I'm not listening.
Yeah.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, thank you so much. So now we're going to go into just the do's and don'ts of the chief judge. So one, you want to discuss your expectations for the position. So you want to discuss that with your contest chair, as well as during your briefings with the voting judges, as well as the timers and the ballot. So everybody understands what's expected of them for the contest. You're going to also manage the functionary breakout. So you're going to be sort of the lead of the breakout when you go into the breakout room with your ballot counters. So you want to make sure that you manage that correctly. You're going to also manage and ensure that you get the time record from the timers. The timers will not be going into the breakout room with you and the ballot counters. So you need to make sure you have a way in place to get that timing record before you move forward. A great idea is to do a test email with your judges and timers before the contest. That way you can make sure you have all their email addresses, make sure that they're spelled correctly, make sure that they're getting to the judges and that they can respond back to you. So it's a great idea to do that in advance of the contest, so that way you're not waiting till the day of the contest and then issues arise. You can share your screen during the breakout room. That's one of the great things about being on Zoom and doing a virtual contest. So if you've received all of the ballots into your email address, you can share your screen if need be, so the ballot counters can take a look at the ballots that way from your screen. We want to make sure as well that we get the results to the contest chair in a timely fashion. So one of your roles is to make sure that you get who won, who got second, who got third over to the contest chair. And then you need to make sure that you, of course, receive the tie-breaking judge's ballot and you only confer with it if you need to. So now that we've gone over the do list, let's take a peek at the don't list. So one, you don't want to assume that someone is taking care of the paperwork. Until you send me your judge's eligibility form, I don't believe that it's completed as of yet. So you want to make sure that you have all that information in hand and just not assume that somebody's going to get it to you in a timely fashion. I would recommend making sure that you have it at least 24 hours before the day of the contest, and that way you'll have everything in place and you won't have any worries before the contest. You also don't want to assume that just because somebody has been a Toastmaster for a long period of time that they know all of the speech contest rules. The speech contest rules change, things are added, things are removed. So if they aren't consulting the newest edition of the rule book, there may be some things that they don't know or don't understand. So that's why it's important to do every briefing as if somebody is coming in for the first time. Then that way you can make sure that they get all the information that they need. You don't want to forget about the Sergeant at Arms. The Sergeant at Arms plays a huge role in contests, especially the evaluation contest, because we have a separate breakout room where all of those individuals go for 5 minutes to complete their evaluation and come back in. So you want to make sure that you utilize the Sergeant at Arms as necessary. You don't want to assume that any documents were received. That goes back to me talking about the eligibility form. So you never want to make any assumptions when it comes to putting a speech contest together. You want to make sure that things are in place by having those items in hand. You also don't want to expect everyone to get the ballot. So you don't want to just assume because you sent out an email that that person got it. That goes back to the need to do a test email. So making sure that you test that out in advance, have people reply back to you received so that you know that that email address works and you are connected with that particular judge, ballot counter, or timer. You also don't want to assume who receives the results. So you want to make sure that you get the results to the contest chair. You don't want to give them to somebody else and assume that they're going to make their way to the contest chair. You want to be the person that specifically gives those results to the contest chair. You want to make sure that you have it at least 24 hours before the day of the contest. So you want to make sure that you have all that information in hand. You also don't want to assume that somebody has been a Toastmaster for a long period of time that they know all of the speech contest rules. The speech contest rules change, things are added, things are removed. So if they aren't consulting the newest edition of the rule book, there may be some things that they don't know or don't understand. So that's why it's important to do every briefing as if somebody is coming in for the first time. Then that way you can make sure that you get all the information that they need. You don't want to forget about the Sergeant at Arms. The Sergeant at Arms plays a huge role in contests, especially the evaluation contest, because we have a separate breakout room where all of those individuals go for 5 minutes to complete their evaluation and come back in. So you want to make sure that you have it at least 24 hours before the day of the contest. So you want to make sure that you have all that information in hand. You also don't want to assume that results to the contest chair. And last but not least, you don't want to open if there is not a tie. So you don't want to open the tie-breaking judge's ballot and show it to the ballot counters if there's not a tie. So again, that goes back to keeping that tie-breaking judge secret and only using that ballot if you must use it to break a tie.